Good morning. Hey, welcome to Wake Up West Coast for November. I am so excited to be back with you. I don't know about you, but it feels like it's been a minute since we were all together, and today we are in for a treat. So thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I absolutely need to thank our sponsors today. We had a morning mingle sponsor, Disher, this morning is with us. Hopefully you had a chance to stop by their table, get some of that fidget putty, and learn a little bit more about the great things that the Disher team is doing. So will you join me in thanking the team from Disher? Disher's really been a long-time friend and supporter of the Chamber, and so we just greatly appreciate all that they do for us. We also have a program sponsor this morning, Independent Bank, and joining me from Independent Bank is Brad Kessel. Good morning, Brad.
Good morning, Jody. You
Sure,
clap? Yeah, please.
Brad always deserves a round of applause. So Brad, tell us a little bit about Independent Bank. We saw that you opened up a spot here on the Lakeshore, a full-service branch on Riley about a year ago. So what made you decide to come into the Holland market?
Very good, Jody, and it's great to see a great turnout here today. So Independent Bank actually has been in the market a number of years. We had a loan production office for a few years right here downtown, and that's sort of our entry strategy as we come into a market, and it starts with people. So it's first of all bringing the talent onto our team, which we felt we did, and once we got established, we then sought out a larger physical location, and so we found the branch on Riley in 31, and it has actually exceeded our expectations. You know, really, why come to the Holland community? Actually, I've been in my current role as CEO of our company since 2011, and for a long time really had an interest in extending our presence beyond the Grand Rapids market and here to the Lakeshore here in Holland. And the reason being is Ottawa County is the fastest growing county in the state of Michigan. And it's, I think, a county that very emulates independent, sort of a blue-collar work ethic, you know, all about relationships. And so that's why we wanted to get out here.
That's great. So one of the things that we saw you do was become a premier partner with the Chamber. Thank you for that as a silver sponsor. How else do you get involved with the communities that you're in?
So really, when we think about success factors at Independent Bank, yeah, you know, we of course it starts with our customers and our associates, and of course we're in a highly regulated industry, so it's regulators and shareholders, but the community is what it's all about. So for a bank can only be as strong as its community. So what you'll find for Independent Bank is that we lend in the market, we will invest in the market with dollars, you'll see us sponsor, you'll see us volunteering, and oftentimes, like the Chamber as an example, you'll find independent leadership on the board. And I'm very proud of when we first opened our branch, a great example. We had a drawing, and we gave away in that drawing, I think roughly about $10,000, just some seed money for some local nonprofits. So that's some of what we do. I would point back to this past October. We had our 8th annual Be the Difference Day. And so Independent is scattered around across the state of Michigan and 25 counties with 59 locations. And in all those markets on Be the Difference Day, we were out volunteering for the day. And the employees got to pick which entities or projects to work on. And at the end of the day when we left behind a check. The checks added up that day to $140,000, and so that's a little bit of what Independent does in our communities.
That's fantastic. Let's talk later about Community Impact Day. As we wrap up our time together here, Brad, what's one last thing you think that our members should know about Independent Bank?
You know, Independent, you know, while we are newer to the Holland community, we are one of the oldest financial institutions in the state of Michigan. We have been around now 160 years. And the other, I think, key stat is we are the largest bank headquartered in the state of Michigan, so at 5.2 billion assets. We have 850 employees, and the key about Independent, we are customer-centric. So in you know, a lot of companies will say, hey, they put the customer first and so on. But that truly is in everything that we try to do. Think about how do we take care of the customer. And so when we invest, our investment priorities are in this order. Number one, we invest in our people. And so it's bringing on, training, developing our people. Number two, it's technology. We live in the digital age. And so really important that we continue to invest in technology and make it easy to bank with your bank. So that's Independent. And number three, we'll invest in some level of brick and mortar. We want it to be a nice place for our customers to come and bank with us, but also for our staff. So that's the Independent story. And for those of you that currently bank with us, thank you. For those that maybe don't today, and maybe you're not entirely happy with your bank, give us a shot. We'd love to take care of you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Will you join me in thanking Brad? Okay, so you know if you're at a chamber event, we're always going to build in some networking, and we're going to do that now. So there's some cards on your table with questions that our speaker today has prompted us with for a good conversation starter before we get going. So here's your question for your table networking today, and that is, how has your attitude towards work changed over the course of your year, of your career, or the year? Pick a time frame. So how has your attitude about work changed over the course of your career? We've got 6 minutes. You're probably at a table of 6. Hannah's going to start a timer, so be mindful of the people around you. Take a minute max per person and share your story. Go.
Yeah, that's great. Good luck. Keep cheering you on. Slide in.
John.
Okay, welcome back. This is a dangerous topic. I know you could go on all morning talking about this at your tables, and I hope that you'll find time afterwards to continue these conversations. But I don't want to spend any more time without getting on to our speaker today. I am so excited for you to be able to hear from today's speaker. As we were preparing for this, and I was thinking about how do I introduce today's speaker, I realized that our speaker really embodies all of our core values. He is absolutely an innovative trailblazer with contagious energy and a positive attitude. That is what we're about at the Chamber, and so it's so fun when we can find speakers that align with us in this way. So without further ado, I'm going to just get you right on to today's speaker. Join me in welcoming John LoDuca to the stage.
Thank you, Jody. I'm so glad to be here, and I truly believe we have the best chamber in the state of Michigan. Can we just acknowledge Jody and her team? They're just fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, I love being here. Pop quiz, things you can tell about your speaker within 10 seconds. I am a weather optimist. Clearly, I'm dressed for boating. I woke up, it was 32 degrees, but I'm delighted to be here with you. I spent 22 years of my career with a hypothesis, and that hypothesis is that a company's greatest asset and its competitive advantage is its wisdom. Greeks called it phronesis. The Japanese in the 90s or the 2000s started to call it tacit knowledge. And it's this ineffable thing that lives inside of every organization. And my job all of this time, 2 businesses that I built to go and exercise this thesis, was to go in, gather that intellectual property out of the heads of the people that had it, transform it into process, and help scale the organization. So my job would be to drive top line in an organization. But what I learned along the way was this wisdom connects to purpose and meaning for the people that participate in the organization. And so I'm thrilled to be here to share these ideas with you. I have some good news, I have some bad news, and I have some kind of sad news. The good news is, 22 years, I have 4 hours of content for you today. I'm super excited. The bad news, I only have 40 minutes. The sad news is, you're probably greatly relieved, but I'll get right into it. Okay, so we are living in a transformational dynamic, a time that is very, very different. And the stat that freaked everybody out and went quite viral was this Gallup poll that came out, and they do a global study, and these numbers just keep getting weirder and stranger. 85%, I want you to just be with that for a second. 85% of the workforce are dissatisfied with their work. Let's just pretend you're the world. These 3 tables, happy to be here. The rest of you, not as much. Half of you would leave if there were donuts across the street. If you imagine this in your organization, with your head count, with your people, with your teams, it's a real concern, and everyone is talking about this right now. And everyone wants to know why. Why is this happening? What's going on? How do we fit in? As a generation is changing in their attitudes and opinions, why is this happening? I think it's the wrong question. I actually think that the question we ought to be asking is, when is it? Because when is a very important characteristic in the life of work as we understand it in Western civilization. It is very, very different than it's ever been. And so here's a high-level overview of work. We've transitioned from craft, sort of an artisanal age that preceded the industrial age, and things changed. We saw the industrial age develop, it became dominant. We saw the United States take the stage. The Japanese ascended with lean, and they brought that to the table, and it became basically the established standard for manufacturing, and it spilled into all other areas of work. And now we're into a new chapter, a kind of an uncharted territory with technology now moving right into artificial intelligence. For those of you that are more historically minded, I won't go too deep into this, but this is probably the top thinkers from a business management theory standpoint for the last couple hundred years. We start with Adam Smith. We're talking about the invisible hand up here on the top left, right? We're talking about division of labor. And then we have Taylor, who is the guy with a stopwatch. He was the first management consultant and would walk into organizations and just sit down and go, what are you doing? And kind of make it faster and more efficient. We know about him. And then, of course, we know Henry Ford and the abundance of production capabilities that grew out of Detroit and really led an industry and an empire. And then, of course, we saw what happened right at the end of World War II. Taiichi Ono and the Japanese, they decided to refine mass production principles and develop lean. And so you see this, Edward Demings was involved, and then of course Drucker was writing about it, and then something interesting starts to happen. We move into this little bald guy at the top here, Michael Gerber. Gerber's like Prometheus. Gerber grabbed these ideas and applied them to the small business world. So if you've read E-Myth or E-Myth Revisited, Gerber said, I'm going to apply these here. And of course, Smith and Welch applied these outside of automotive, and an abundance of lean manufacturing principles permeate the entire workforce. Well, where does it go then? Well, it starts to spell Steve Blank's work. That's the precursor of the lean startup, those ideas of the lean startup. We start to spill into that. So all of this perfected approach for work. Gino Wickman's approach with traction looks at the business as a whole, and what happens next? Well, where are we? We're at 2007. What happened right around then? Hey, let's talk banking. What happened in 2007 and 8? Yeah, we had a real change in the workforce and in the economy, didn't we? We had the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression, and workforce dynamics started to change, and attitudes about work began to shift dramatically. Suddenly, there's this thing nobody had heard about before called the gig economy. What is the gig economy? What is this? What is the gig economy? We called it moonlighting when I was a kid, and it was called moonlighting because you did it by the cover of darkness, because if anybody found out you had a side hustle or a side gig, you might get sacked, right? Now, 40% of the American workforce has a side hustle. People are subsidizing their incomes with outside activities outside of their main role. Things start to change, and we start to feel the momentum of this shift. Attitudes about work shifting dramatically. Now we move into the last chapter here and what happened a few years ago that changed everyone's attitudes about work. We had a global pandemic. Last time we had a global pandemic, we saw the introduction of socialism as a mandate. The workers stood up and said, hey, wait, whoa. We're not putting up with this crap anymore. We saw this huge rise in the unions, and at 2020, we saw another huge change in attitudes about work. 2021, we saw the Great Resignation. People said, you know what, for the first time, I'm not doing it. Stepping away. And that lingering dynamic, Brad and I were discussing this, hybrid work, people working from home, attitudes have shifted about work, and our generation, we're sort of wrangling this because they've changed right on our watch. I know you're already talking about this. These are boardroom conversations. Jody confirmed, like, these are the kinds of things we're talking about today. Right on the heels of this massive change, people withdrawing from the workforce, the introduction of ChatGPT, the first production level, mass use AI. We've been talking about AI forever. I did a TED Talk, I think it was 2017. We didn't even know what it was. We were watching videos and reading reports, but no one was using it in a day-to-day like they are now. And we're seeing the implications. The void was filled by this new technology that does want to do routine and automated work. So these attitudes and opinions about work are reflected in a historical context. And I want to talk about it. What's changed? Well, pretty much everything, right? The kind of work we do, the way we do it, the pace, the workers themselves and their attitudes and opinions and their social values. The balance of power has also changed. This is a significant indicator about what's going on with work. We've seen something happen that in the course of human history we haven't bumped into. Widespread abundance. So this is my dad's generation, 50s and 60s. These are guys heading off to the factory. They've got ties on, their shoes are shined, they show up early, they stay late. There was scarcity. They needed a job. They had to find one, and when they got one, they needed to keep it. And so the attitude was, if you get a job, you can expect this from your workers. If they took a job, you'd expect discipline from them. They'd show up early, they'd stay late, they'd work very hard, and they were afraid of losing their job. So you'd work in an organization and you'd plow into it and you'd do your best, and maybe after years of doing it, you might decide, I kind of like the work. Actually, that might bump into you one day. It's not a precursor, it's not the criteria for deciding on a career. It would just be opportunity. Once you got the job, years later, you might decide, I kind of like it. Maybe after 20 years, you develop a sense of belonging. You know what? We're a Ford family. I like being here. I like being a part of this organization. I feel connected to the brand, to the values. It's become a part of me. Does this feel familiar to you? Well, what have we done? We've completely inverted this paradigm now. This is an upside-down dynamic now. For the younger generations, younger than me, I'm Gen X, everyone younger than me grew up with such an abundance mindset that they actually are going to determine their level of contribution based first on a sense of belonging. If they don't feel that, you're not going to get discipline out of them. If they don't feel a sense of purpose and connection, as you probably already know, that affinity for the work that they're doing, they don't want to be a part of it. And they have choices and options, and they're not afraid. I remember my dad telling me, you know, you can't have 12 jobs on your resume. No one's going to hire you. Now it's practically a precursor, like a badge of courage. Like, you know, I pop around, I can. I was talking to somebody here in town, I won't name names, but they run a nice manufacturing company, and they said, you know, I've got people who leave because they don't like the toilet paper. They just go across the street because they know they can. So just show of hands. Do you feel me on this too? Are you feeling this and bumping into some of these ideas? I see a few hands raised. Okay. Thank you for the obligatory hand raise. I think it's prevalent. I think we are kind of bumping into this. We haven't named it yet. And so if you look at it from this schematics, you'll see that these attitudes have changed. These are our generations, okay? This is the age group for those generations. And these are their priorities. These are the things that matter to these different generations. Boomers saw their parents struggling through the Depression, and they grew up with a drive for security. My generation, Gen X, we grew up in the 80s. We were follow your bliss. We were looking for significance. Preceding generations rode that wave. They wanted freedom. They wanted opportunity to expand and explore and adventure through the world. And now it's expanding right into the next one, which is Z, and they want purpose and meaning. And if we don't give it to them, they'll find it elsewhere. So my work, as I'd mentioned, was to go in and find wisdom, to go in and find what was working. I wasn't the kind of consultant to go in and teach, hey, let me tell you what you should do, because I was always in a different industry where I wasn't an expert. My job was to find those experts, figure out what they were doing, what their attitudes and opinions were, and clone it so we could scale. And what we learned is that there's something missing in organizations, and the ones that got this right solved for these different attitudes about work. A connection to purpose, a connection to the greater good of the organization as a whole, to being a part of this team, to having access to it. Sounds easy, does hard. So let me go up to the next one. Tenure in these organizations, 7 years. 5 for our Gen Xers, and 3 for millennials, and 2 for our friends Gen Z. They're going to hang out about the hour after they've become suitably vetted and trained up. They're going to pop. If we don't have another way to engage them and provide a career path for them or opportunity for them to expand and explore their goals and their drive for purpose within the organization. And so they learn different too. Our generation, you know, we learn on televisions. Smartphones are now the #1. That's how we conduct business and banking in certain parts of the world. And for anybody under 30, it's their primary. It's how they interface with the world. Right now, even. So here's the big thesis. For over 100 years, business has used process to basically drive predictability, consistency, and to dumb down work. And we got to a science about it. We've perfected it. We've gotten outstanding at it, and we've turned companies into machines, and we've tried to ask people to fit inside of these cog-like structures. We want them to be robots. And when they got the opportunity, when they got a breath of fresh air, when they were home for a little while during COVID, they thought, good grief, no. And they didn't want to come back. And they are asking different questions, and they will continue to do so because the economy is allowing them to do it, because there isn't a sense of fear or scarcity, and we have got to play the game a little differently. If we want to attract talent, if we want to keep it, and if we actually want to engage this younger generation, not just try to turn them into functionaries. Hey, you've got ChatGPT if you just need a disinterested information delivery system. If you want someone to participate, to care, to actually pour into the organization like you did over your career, we're going to have to embrace them in a different way. Okay. This is a term that comes out of the lean manufacturing world, and you probably haven't seen it because it's kind of taboo these days. It's so offensive. The mandate was idiot-proofing processes, to drive them down to such a level that any goofball could do them. And frankly, that's the problem. And so what we've done is we've disintermediated work from purpose, from meaning, from connection to something greater, and people don't want to do it. You feel me? You guys get where I'm going with this? Okay, so this is the opening salvo. This is me reading emails. Actually, you know this. This is a famous clip from modern times. This was Charlie Chaplin's, kind of his mainstay. This is a huge commentary on the nature of work. This is the 1930s, but he was commenting on this shift from craft into the industrial age and what it was doing to people. I mean, we could just sit here and laugh. It looks like just a nonsense, crazy world, except we're doing the same thing with the sole exception that we're doing it with information. We're doing it with emails. We're doing it with phone calls. We're doing it with transactional type. Yeah, I just could keep going. But by and large, he was making a comment 100 years ago that continues to be relevant today. This kind of a work environment is dehumanizing our workers, and now that they have options, now that scarcity's not on the table, they want to find greener pastures and participate in work in another way. If you're getting uncomfortable, if you're sitting in your seat going, great, I didn't come for bad news, I want to hear some good news, the whole second half of this is going to be, okay, so how do we handle this? So what are we supposed to do now might be what you're asking yourself sitting in your seat. I get this. My kids are dealing with this, or I see this with the younger people in my business. How do we overcome it? How do we address this? Well, we need different tools and new frameworks. We kind of have to think about this problem from a new perspective nowadays. And that's time. It's been 100 years. We've been working a paradigm and have perfected it. It's time to transition to a new one. And so this is the way you were raised, and so was I. This is the top-down organizational model called the corporation. And it's an oldie but a goodie. Came out of the 1860s and 70s when the railroad and telegraph companies were spanning across the West. They needed a new model to organize information. So line of sight management would be sort of cottage industry. We're in the factory, and I see Tony over there screwing around. I go, hey, get back to work, Tony. I can't do that when I've got 3,500 miles and 20,000 workers spanning across, enormous, drift of land. So they borrowed from the military and built this top-down organizational model. And you've been inside of it, maybe haven't noticed. But this is the predominant organizational structure. And it's not absolutely terrible from connecting to purpose if you're employee number 5, if you're one of the top people in the organization, because you're in the spin of what's the purpose and what's going on around here, what are we doing about it. It's a little more tricky when there's 100 people or you're employee number 1,000. You'll never gain access to that purpose of the business, the wisdom of the organization, its reason. You're too far away from it. And as this organization gets bigger and messier and the telephone game ensues, you wonder what so-and-so's doing way out on the shop floor or out in a remote office, and it's because they've gotten distended from that core. They've gotten too far away from the centerpiece of what's going on inside that organization. If you got hired by Hayworth, I mean, God bless these people, this room and what they've done in our community. If you got hired, by Hayworth maybe, 50 years ago, you might have access to the wisdom of the organization. It's different now, right? Because you might be a small part of it. There's a good story with Hayworth. There's a fellow named Dan. He won the Dick Hayworth Award just a couple of years ago. Dan's a guy, he was a picker. He'd ride the high-low and had his job, but during breaks, he would go around all over Hayworth and see how the parts would be combined so that even in his own little domain, he could understand the whole. And Dick Hayworth gave him the Hayworth Award because that's the kind of thinking that you'd want someone on the shop floor to have, that they're really thinking about the whole and understanding the dynamic, but it took that kind of unique initiative. This is what people are craving, though, is a sense of meaning and purpose with their work. But unless they take that initiative, they may not get it. And so we need a new paradigm. And we call this a wisdom-driven model. And the idea is wisdom is a thing. It's a corporate asset. It lives in the heads of the people in the organization. If you get your hands on it, it's a great asset. It can be levered and deployed for growth to make you more resilient. It can de-risk an organization. If you insource wisdom, what do we do and why do we do it and how do we do it? And it drives processes and it trickles out into work. And so this is how it's normally structured, but what's neat about this model is it's universal access. It's like air, we can all breathe it. As opposed to being squirreled away in the ivory tower in a structure like this, everyone can gain access to the wisdom. A brand new person can find out our why. They can understand what we're doing here, our values, our principles as an organization, the heritage of this narrative. I joined the company 100 years later, and there's some beautiful photos in the hallway, and I can get a feel for the heritage of that organization. I can get like an echo, like a ghost rummaging around in the attic of what that brand stood for. But it's not the same thing as hanging out with GW and hearing it firsthand. But that's what we crave. If people on your team are craving purpose, how do we give it to them? So my talk isn't, this is the problem, because that's not fun. And it isn't just to show you this model. I want to talk about who's doing this, who's doing it well, how they're tackling this. Just show you some examples so we can have a proper conversation, and I can leave you with some ideas you can embrace and employ in your organization. So this is a cute graphic. Yeah, we get it. Wisdom is this thing. What is it? It's stories. It's values. It's how why informs the how. And that work trickles down. Okay, so what's neat about that model is it organizes this information, so instead of it being merely top down like a quarterback calling the plays, it's now flowing inside the organization. Because if you go back to this, what's really groovy about it is wisdom lives in the frontiers too, doesn't it? It doesn't just live in the ivory towers. It doesn't just live with the executive suite. The model on the left, that old model from the railroad companies, that model was, we know how things are done around here, and we're going to push that out to workers like they are soldiers out in the field. Model on the right says, we're going to insource wisdom. We're going to pull it from the folks out on the team. We're going to gather wisdom from the people who have it, all those pioneering souls out there who are innovating on the front lines, and we're going to make that wisdom our wisdom as an organization and teach and use it as a convener, use it as a way to bring people together and bring them under the same umbrella of purpose and meaning. Well, this is the structure for doing it. The why is your wisdom, right? And the how is the process, and the work is the what. But what's neat is if they inform on each other, all of these assets can grow. So how do we do it? I'd like to tell you a love story. It's early, but I'm still going to tell you a love story. But it's about business. And for all of you who have been a part of a business, a small or a little one, you know that they all started with a love story, right? I know it's corny, but it's true. Someone, some pioneering soul, got started in a business because they fell in love with an idea, with a type of a client, with a way of solving a problem. And they made themselves exactly what that marketplace needed from them. So if you're a first generation business, if you are a second generation business, if your business has been around for an hour or 150 years, somewhere, somehow, someone started by absolutely falling in love with creating value and that reciprocity of getting a check for creating that value. They found a market that liked them. And a lot like speed dating, you know, going out on eHarmony and going on a bunch of lousy dates, they finally found a match. They found someone willing to write a check for what they love to do. And so if you're in the 100-year-old business, you know, there's photos of grandpa and grandma in front of the old grocery truck, and they're so proud of themselves. And you see that pride. And maybe 100 years later, they have 50 stores. How did they get there? What did they gain or lose along the way? Those are stories that live inside their heart. And that entrepreneur who started that business fought very, very hard to build the organization that way. That's chapter one, is they fall in love. You know, boy meets girl, girl meets boy meets boy, whatever it is, but they fell in love with that marketplace, and they became this extraordinary reflection of it. Chapter two, they hire helpers. And you see that. Now, they're delegating away some of the things in the organization that they don't like to do. Then come along at chapter three, they hire proxies. Now they're transferring knowledge about what they love about that market and how they understand how to serve them to a host of people who are now serving in either lead gen, conversion, or fulfillment. They're saying, fall in love with the client, understand what's essential, get passionate the way that I am so that we can continue this romance. We can continue to serve this marketplace at this really high level of value. And it troubles them when they get it wrong. And you see the entrepreneur getting nervous. If your business has been grabbed up by a private equity firm or leadership have retired and moved on, you may not even have had access to that story ever. But one day, a long time ago, It was what they were obsessed with, was making sure that their values and the way that they serve were replicated and cloned, and they were able to promulgate that as the business scaled. Then they go to the last chapter, they go from 3 to 4. Now they go from hiring proxies who are basically clones of themselves. Now they're hiring what we call operators. Now they're bringing in people like, go figure out payroll software. I don't know anything about payroll software. I can't help you, but it has to be awesome, and I need it to work really well. And I need somebody over here in the finance department, and I don't know how to do all of that, but we need to hire people that can and can do a great job. And you see the entrepreneur leaders starting to drift into the background as more and more people are standing in between them and their beloved. And it makes them nervous. Maybe the business is successful with this and they do knowledge transfer well, but eventually what they find is you see your entrepreneur leader either exit because they can't handle it, they miss the drive, the adrenal hit of being out there on the front lines. They have an affair, you know what that looks like with a business owner? They start another business. They say, I'm gonna start something new over here. Or they figure all this out and they create this community of people, all who have fallen in love with the same idea, all who understand what we are doing as a community of people serving this entrepreneur, or this client, this marketplace, and they're able to expand that. Many of you belong to companies that cracked that code. You see it. And the people on the team in the close-knit community of people who are early on, they got that. They fought for it. They believed in it. They signed off. They were enlisted, and they were like, we're going to help participate in this. As the business grows and new people join, whose responsibility is to keep that fire lit? It's ours. Whose responsibility is it to socialize that narrative that's now maybe 100 years old? You show up for work, and there's a logo on the wall and a slogan. Do you remember the story of that? No, it preceded you by maybe 100 years. Someone lived for that logo, and that little slogan meant a lot to them. That was their brand. That was their value system out there in the marketplace. You may not have ever heard that story. That's what we have to capture. And so, leaders, here's some advice. Tell your story. Tell it. Know it. Define what it is and socialize this in the organization. Your job is to be a storyteller. Your job is, as a leader, to reflect the values in the organization with what you do every day. Because that connection between the why, the how, and the what is basically where we see results in an organization, where people can feel connection to purpose. Does this resonate with you? Do you feel that? That sense of purpose? When you connect to it, it changes the feeling of work, doesn't it? It stops feeling like modern times and you're doing this with a wrench all day, and even the most mundane of activities can be infused with a sense of purpose and meaning. You can participate now with a sense of clarity. So go tell your story, leaders. People want to hear it. They want to understand where they belong, what they're fighting for. They want to know what team they belong to, and what's that love story all about. What is it really, what's the essential element of it? And for all you managers or your integrators, if you're running on EOS, your job is to extract that wisdom out of those subject matter experts and bake it into the how. So what does that mean? Well, if you get a recipe for how to make an apple pie, what do you get? You get a list of ingredients and you get a list of directions. But if you ask your grandma how to make apple pie, if she's still with you, you know you're going to get stories of the Great Depression, how they couldn't get apples that one summer. It's a completely different experience, isn't it? Because there's a story behind everything. There's a why behind all of the how. So inside your organization right now are subject matter experts that have that wisdom, that do things in the organization a certain way because of what they understand about the why. There's a story in that company, and they're plugged into it, and they're excellent and meticulous, and they're fastidious about the way that they do things for a reason. Go find out what that is and bake it into the operating system of the business. Make it part of the process. How do you do that? Well, you interview them, and you ask them, and you have them teach you, and you document it, and you make it the way. And then as you bring in other people, they can connect to the why when they're doing some mundane activity. No job is without its dignity unless we fail to enlist people in its larger piece of the equation. unless we help them see that it's a piece of a greater purpose for an organization. And for those of you that are, maybe you're juniors on the team, have them interview. If you're a leader, have them interview you. And if you're a young person on a team, go take your boss to lunch. Go ask them questions. Understand what they're doing. It will change your relationship to what your aspect of work is. They should know what your passions are. They should know what your vision is. They should have a clarity around that, and they should hear it from you. And when they're connected to it, it changes their sense of purpose. What we've done with workers is we've said, stay in your corner and do your job. And they're pushing back against the table. So bring them in. Tell them what matters. Take the time with them. They want to participate. They're actually passionate about it. They just can't reach you. And so take the time to have lunch with them. Since most of you are the kinds of leaders who would be interviewed, take the time with them. Even invite them to do so. I've got clients all over the country. One of the things that they do is they have a new hire interview their boss. Not the other way around, but once they've accepted the offer, the responsibility is to interview the boss and find out, what are we doing? Where are we headed? What's essential? Not about the job the new hire is going to be doing, but to be spoken to like a consultant, to actually just share the vision of the organization with that new hire so that they can be a part of it and feel that passion and feel that energy behind the organization's real purpose. This is Barbara Barton, and I like telling her story. This is the practical side of the conversation. So now we're going to go from problem to really get down into the tactical activities. Barbara Barton is a treasure. I think she's like really a national treasure. She's this little old lady who used to do financial advising at her kitchen table and built a very successful business down in Texas. She's like a #1 advisor on her platform and retired recently. And we got a chance to interview Barbara Barton, and she's the kind of example that I'm talking about. This is someone who's been doing what she's been doing for a long time, built a business with a lot of intentionality behind it, and there isn't a darn thing this gal does that doesn't come with a story, a why, a purpose. And absent that, you might think when you work there that your job is just to fill out some paperwork. But when you hear Barbara explain even the most mundane ideas and activities, you get a renewed commitment. You get a connection to the why because she's absolutely in love with the client. She still has a fire in her belly to serve and create value. And when you hear it, it's engaging. It's actually really quite attractive. You think, wow, I want to do that too. I want to become like that. I want to serve at that level. Even the most mundane activities are elevated when you get an opportunity to sit down and listen to the person who built this organization share these stories. And so we built this. This is a platform that we developed to capture stories. And I love Saul. He's cute. Matches his glasses with his tie with every outfit. And he loves to tell stories and communicate and connect. And so what we talk about is your task is to go out, capture stories, and harvest them and put them into something, a central repository so new hires can access them. A way for people to kind of connect to those, even if some of the people will not be on the team in a few years. I might like to know you as a leader. I'm a brand new hire. I may never get a chance to have lunch with you. Maybe you're going to retire. You have exiting executives. We have, this generational dynamic. We have some very senior veteran people who are now moving out of the workforce onto greener pastures, retirement, or what have you. And wouldn't it be nice to know their stories and understand their why and have that as an archived resource for an organization? You bet. That's the type of thing that you can capture, and it's right in your organization right now. It's free, and you feel like you're too busy to do it. Think about all the time you're wasting trying to find people, trying to plug them in and engage them when they can engage themselves because they'll just get excited too. They'll say, I want to participate in this. I want to be a part of what's happening here. That's our charge. We can no longer say, well, you get a good paycheck and a nice benefits package. Aren't you happy? Your father's generation would have been thrilled. And I get all this free time? They would have thought, that's enough. And aren't we perplexed, flummoxed, that it isn't enough? We have to go beyond that now, and we have to plug into something that didn't seem important to our generation or our fathers and mothers. We now have to plug into purpose and meaning and connection. And it's on you to do it. It's fun. It's valuable. It drives performance. It drives retention of key people, and it de-risks the organization because you know you're going to lose them. Eventually, they're going to go to greener pastures. Some of your best are going to migrate over to a competitor, or they're just going to age out. So go grab that asset of their stories, their why behind their how. bake it into process so that it can live and have a longer legacy beyond their tenure inside your company. It's free. It's fun. And it works dramatically for attracting and retaining the talent that's out there seeking an organization that'll give them that opportunity to gain access to purpose. So what did we cover? What did we talk about? Well, we talked about work has changed, and we kind of have to as well. We have to evolve. We can't fight it anymore. I hear grown-up people sitting around, and I've been a part of this, kind of grousing about younger workers and how different and alien they are and how their needs are so frustrating, but we just have to adopt a different mindset. Work has changed, and attitudes have to change with it, ours in particular. Number two is, these people want purpose and connection, and as soon as we realize that, it's a whole different ballgame. If you're fighting it and saying, well, we just pay them more and they're still unhappy, or we let them work from home and it's still not working, it's because they're seeking something else from us. And once you connect to that, a whole bunch of creativity opens up about how to solve it and what you as a leader can do to connect and create that kind of value. Number three, wisdom. Wisdom is the thing that connects all this why and how and the what of work every day. And it's baked into process. It lives in the everyday things, from cleaning a toilet to taking a client call to doing the most robust and complex things inside your organization. Baked inside of it is that passion of why, the wisdom of the organization's most senior leadership who understood it because they did that role and they did it exceptionally well, or you wouldn't have a company to work at. Someone solved it. They solved lead gen, they solved lead conversion, and they solved fulfillment, or you wouldn't have a paycheck. And if you're a business owner, you like hearing that because you're like, darn right. We worked really hard to get those things correct and struggled and sacrificed. And if we could pour that into others, not only would they do better work, but they'd probably find a lot more integrity in the work. They'd find more value in it. And so we go to the next one. Wisdom, yes, lives inside a process, and connecting to it creates that sense of purpose. It creates that sense of meaning. I believe work problems are not demographic problems. I don't think they're race problems. I don't think they're gender problems. I think that they are treating us like they are investors with their time. And God bless them for asking those questions and behaving like that. They want to know if they're going to enlist in your organization. They're going to give you some time, maybe a few years. They want to know what you stand for. Shouldn't we step to the standard to attract and retain that kind of talent? Shouldn't we sort of reframe what we do so that we can meet them where they're at? It's a great opportunity. All right, so I'll pause and just let you hit me up with some questions. Some of the things that I think are on the table are questions about work, and really what I really want to know from you is, let me just start with this. How many of you are owners in your organization? Just show of hands. Okay, so a decent smattering of you. And how many of you are leaders? You say you're leaders in an organization, majority of you. Yeah, okay, very good. So hit me with a question. Jody, you've got the mic over there. I'd love to hear your thoughts and ideas about this. Oh, you're all very quiet now. Yes, sir, in the back.
So just thinking about the role of communication, could you talk about different ways that you've seen that leaders be successful in communicating that why throughout an organization that does have multiple layers?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So the first thing is, you need to be really clear about what you are as an organization. So if you think about it as clarity around it, most choice making in the enterprise is values driven. And unconsciously, business owners and leaders are operating within their value system. The problem is when values haven't been defined, everyone brings their own to the table and it's just sort of a free-for-all. So the first thing that has to happen is define your values as an organization. And figuring out what those are then means that you can begin to storytell how your values actually make decisions or inform choice making. This process works because we all believe in this. If you believe in something completely different or even opposite of that, you're going to show up and try to do this process in a different way. And so storytelling is a key component of that. And at different levels, your job is to basically say, this is how we participate in the whole at every level of the organization. And so each tier, senior leadership, this is where we're going as an organization, this is the value. But here's the thing that we've learned in corporate. The idea is you might only hear from the leader that you are attached to, which might be, if you're very new in the organization, it might be very, very low. You seriously want to hear from the people on top. So channels and platforms that allow leaders to broadcast messages, knowledge management is the term that's used. It's a technology capability, and it's a way of gathering up those stories, and every single person should have direct access to them. So yes, I want to hear from my manager. I want to know how that manager participates in the larger vision and aligns with those values, but I still want to hear from senior leadership. I want to hear from the person that founded the place. I want direct access, and since they can't have lunch with me, because I'm the new guy, you need to be able to give them a technology access point to that. So those stories, videos are a great delivery system. You can stick things in the cloud now and make those accessible to people that want them. A lot of my clients are using these techniques for onboarding. You're going to get enculturated when you get onboarded. It's not just about payroll. We're going to teach you our why. We're going to have stories from our senior leaders explaining the background of the organization, and we will incorporate all of those into just your induction process over the 90 days. All great strategies for pushing message down. Fantastic. Great question. Jody, you got one? You've got time for one more? Yes, sir. Hey, John. Hey.
Real quick question. I'm guessing there's some people out here thinking, boy, this sounds like a lot of work. And they're already overthinking it, trying to figure out, well, that doesn't make any sense for me because I have too much to do now. What do you say to, I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking. What do you say to them?
That's a fantastic question. And I think that because we share EOS, and I think that, Scott, you understand this, like most organizations look at this and they say, how are we going to tackle this? And I'd say, what's the time, if you dollarize the time you spend doing the opposite, fixing these problems, replacing workers, the cost-benefit analysis on this is an easy equation to make. Tenure is a real dollar that you can measure and monetize. And so where do you want to invest your time? Reinventing the wheel or perfecting the approach? So one of the things we recommend is working in a capacity where these are activities and projects that are done not once, but on an ongoing basis as a discrete activity set. Maybe every quarter you're working on capturing organizational wisdom and sharing it with the community of users. It's not a discrete activity like we're just going to race into it and be done one day. It'll be an ongoing but small activity. HR can sometimes own this, training can sometimes own this, and they'll incorporate harvesting stories out of the organization. It's just part of the way they do things. So we're talking about hours a month, not 20 or 30 hours a week. We're talking about small incremental steps moving this forward. Every time you move along, you get a little closer to that truth and the organization orients around it. I think we're at time, so I think I have to stop. But I told you I had 3 hours worth of content. Thank you, Jody.
Perfect. Will you join me in thanking John? Hopefully you all found some pieces today that you can take back to your place of work and implement, bring the wisdom back, right? So a couple of things before we go our separate ways this morning. Next month, we're switching gears just a little bit, and we will be joined by Congressman Huizenga for breakfast with our congressman. We'll be back here, but we'll have an advocacy focus for our morning together. Then in January, we'll be looking at our economic forecast, and that will be at Engedi Church, so we can accommodate a larger crowd. And then we'll be back here with a more traditional Wake Up West Coast in February. On the 13th, we'll be joined by Abby Johnston looking at conscious leadership. So with that, one last reminder to stop by the Disher table on your way out. They have a drawing on their table, so if you haven't already, drop your business card in there. You could be a lucky winner today. So with that, go and make it a remarkable day. Thanks for being here.